All right, this is Obeid on behalf of V Electronics, and in this video, we'll be talking about supply and demand when it comes to protectionism. Okay, we've talked about protectionism in the past videos. It has to do with things like tariffs, import quotas, so on and so forth. Okay, now let's understand how these tariffs or import quotas or even custom papers will impact your supply and demand in both countries, the country that imports a product and a country that exports the product. So when it comes to a country that exports the product, and let's call this country E, E as in exports, okay, your horizontal axis will be quantity, so tons of products. So in tons, so tons of the product being exported. And over here you have price. All right, and then you have your supply and demand as usual. Okay, whereas price goes down, demand goes up, and as quantity goes up, supply goes up. Okay, and price goes up. Now, when there is no trade, okay, let's say between these two countries, we're going to draw the same graph over here. And we call this one CI because it's importing the product. Okay, so CI. Now, when there is no trade between these two countries, okay, when there is no trade between these two countries, your supply and demand will be, let's say, over here. Okay, just near equilibrium. Okay, where supply meets demand. All right. However, when there is trade between these two countries, okay, your supply and demand will be somewhere over here, where supply will exceed demand. Okay, and this is the access that this country will export to this country over here. So this is export. And the reason why demand is lower or less than supply is because when there is no trade, okay, the demand is equivalent to supply. Okay, the suppliers are meeting the demand of the country, of the consumers in the country for personal consumption. Okay, however, when there is trade, when this country goes ahead and exports the product, okay, the supply will be more than demand. Okay, because obviously the total supply of the product will go down, okay, as the suppliers they export the product to another country. And when the total supply of this product goes down, okay, what's going to end up happening is, okay, your demand, okay, will go up. Okay, your demand will go up. All right. However, it won't go up to meet your supply. Okay, your demand won't be enough to meet your supply. So your demand it may go up a bit. Okay, but it won't be enough to meet your supply. So in this case, let's just say when a country exports a product, okay, as the country exports the product and the total reserves, okay, let's call this a reserve. So that would be the total quantity of the product that the country holds in its reserves, just like your banks that hold money in their reserves. Okay, the total reserves will be reduced because they're exporting some of that access to this country. Okay, as a result of which, okay, this country will be left with less in quantity, okay, less of the product than what it started off with. Okay, so this country will be left with less of a particular product, let's say wheat in this case. So let's say this country is exporting wheat. The country will be left with less of that wheat than what it started off with. So if it started off at this point, okay, let's say this is your equilibrium point where demand meets supply. And let's say the price over here, this is 20 cents, and this is tons, so 20 cents a ton. Okay, obviously, as the supply goes up, okay, the prices will go up as well. And because prices go up, the demand, okay, will be less than the supply. All right. And at this point, let's say this is 60 cents a ton. Okay. And we know that the demand is less in quantity compared to what the country is supplying. And the reason why the country is supplying more and producing more is because it has to export the access to the other country. All right. As a result of which, okay, we can say that when there is, okay, no trade, this is no trade, point of no trade at equilibrium. Okay, the demand equals to supply. Okay, however, when there is free trade, which is over here, FT, this is your free trade. When there is free trade, okay, your demand will be less than supply. Your supply will be more than demand, and the price will be more as well. All right, so the price of the product will go up as a result of which the demand will be less in general. Okay, and the supply will be more. All right. Now, this is the country that exports the product. Okay. However, on the other side, okay, you start off somewhere over here, for example. Okay. Let's say this is your equilibrium. Okay. And this is the line that represents no trade where supply meets demand. Okay. And we know that as this country exports wheat, okay, the reserves in this country will grow. Okay, which means this country will have more wheat than what it started off with, as a result of which, okay, your supply, okay, which is this one over here, okay, this will be um, less than demand. Okay, so your demand is this one over here, your supply will be less than demand. So let's say this is your demand. Okay, let's assume this is 20K or 20 tons. Okay, and this one over here, let's say this is 10 tons, which is your supply. And this is the point of free trade. All right. So basically, what's happening over here is this country, the reserves are going down as the prices are going up. Okay. So when the prices are going up, as prices go up, we know that the demand will go down. All right. Now over here, okay, because the reserves are going up, okay, the prices are going down. And because these prices are going down because of free trade, okay, we know that the demand is going up, okay, and supply is going down. So we can safely say that the suppliers, okay, in the country that's exporting the product are better off than the suppliers in this country that is importing the product. Okay, so better off than the suppliers of the other country that is importing the product. Okay, so this is for suppliers. All right, and over here, your consumers are better off. So this is better off. Consumers are better off because obviously they're importing the product and they're having their demand met. So this is your consumers. And over here, you have suppliers who are worse off. So suppliers, we can say suppliers. So SUPP, and this is W. And your demand over here, this is worse off. So demand, people who demand the product, they're worse off. All right, so this is basically how this works. Okay, when it comes to import and export as well as free trade. Okay, however, there is another factor to consider when it comes to import and export between two countries, and that has to do with protectionism. Okay, and protectionism has to do with things like tariffs. It has to do with things like tariffs. Give me one moment. So this is tariffs, as a result of which, what's going to end up happening is, okay, your supply will be more than demand, okay, compared to no trade, compared to the equilibrium point. However, it will be less than demand, okay, compared to, or you can say supply will be less than the supply at full trade, okay, or free trade. Okay, so the supply will be still less. It will be right in the middle when it comes to free trade and no trade. So this is your free trade. This is your no trade. And this supply over here, even though is more than demand, okay, at partial protectionism, for example, let's say when the government decides to import tariffs or impose tariffs rather, okay, where this country, for example, decides to impose tariffs on the suppliers, as a result of which, okay, your um, supply over here is more than demand. However, it is still less than the supply at free trade. Okay, so supply is still less compared to supply at free trade. So supply is less. Supply is less compared to supply at free trade. Supply at free trade. All right, so this is basically how supply and demand works. Okay, on behalf of V Electronics, this is Obey. Have yourself a great day.